For 200 years, one book has stood at the center of a rising faith. To believers, it stands as another witness of Jesus Christ. It has changed history and influenced millions. Yet many respected figures challenge its authenticity.
We just know too much about Joseph Smith. We know he was a con man in 1820 when he found golden tablets
and translated them into scripture.
And believed that Jesus visited North America. These beliefs are barking mad.
So is the Book of Mormon fact or fiction, history or hoax? Well, we want to find out for ourselves. We are the Paul brothers. With a mission to find the answer to this question, we were led off of internet forums and even out of libraries. Because just as with Lehi, our call to adventure was to depart into the wilderness. Led by archaeologist and researcher Jim Gee, we set out to put ourselves and the Book of Mormon to the test.
The blade is from steel, but the handle is from silver.
We will put the claims of the Book of Mormon to the test to find out if it is an obvious fraud or if it truly is the stick of Joseph.
All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, our guests are Hayden and Jackson Paul. They are putting together a new docuseries on Book of Mormon evidences that you will need to take a look at. Hayden and Jackson, welcome to the show.
What's up?
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you. We're excited.
All right, let's dive right into this. This is very intriguing. I know a little bit about this. I was invited to go with you guys, in fact, on your recent trip. I couldn't go. But tell us about what you're doing. What is your idea here with this docuseries, and where is it at so far?
So this is what we're doing. You know, in the church, I think we take a lot of things for granted, and we make some very bold claims, right? We have this extra book of scripture called the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. And I think a lot of times we kind of just gloss that over, being like, that's just another little piece of what the restoration brings. But if we have another testament of Jesus Christ, like, we should be screaming that to the world, right? And you've heard a lot of, general authorities say, apostles, prophets, talk about how kind of the whole, veracity of the claims of the restoration depend on the Book of Mormon itself. And so what we want to do, and what we're doing with this docuseries, is we are bringing the Book of Mormon to life by going to the actual places where it happened, exploring the different theories of geography, and kind of diving into the different archaeological as well as historical evidences of the Book of Mormon to kind of show people that you don't have to, because a lot of the critics will say you have to be stupid in order to believe in the Book of Mormon. You have to kind of suspend a lot of disbelief. And we're just trying to show that that isn't the case, that there actually is tons of physical reasons why you could take the claim seriously.
Yeah, and there's been a few things that have inspired us to make this, right? One of them, obviously, one of the things that I love about The Chosen is that it has brought the New Testament to life, right? I read the stories so much differently, just because it's so much more real to me, right? Another thing is there's been a lot of people in my close circle who have, kind of fallen to because the opposition, their side, they're doing a very good job at using modern forms of media, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, what have you, to kind of debunk, truth claims that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints makes, whether that be about the Book of Mormon or whatever piece of doctrine they want to pick at. And so I think that if they're being so valiant in that effort to tear it down, how much more valiant need our efforts be to support our beliefs if we actually hold them true, and near and dear to our hearts. And so that's kind of what we're embarking to do, and
It's been fun.
it's been crazy so far.
So give us an idea here, guys. You've already gone out. What was your recent expedition? And talk to us a little bit about that. I know you went to Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Can you divulge a few things for us? Can we kind of whet our appetite about what we might be looking at with this?
Yes, of course. We don't want to give away all of the secrets because there's some cool things. A lot of it is things that have already been shared in academic papers that nerds like me read, and Jackson and others, but
nerds
a lot
like
of them,
Hayden.
yeah, nerds like me. But not everyone has got into those, and so we're regurgitating a lot of information. But there is a lot of unique things that are being shared that have never been shared with kind of the larger academic LDS Book of Mormon researching community, right? But as you can see, the name of the show is called The Stick of Joseph, and the reason we are calling it that is because, anyone who's served a mission, been taught by missionaries, you've heard about the prophecy in Ezekiel 37, that the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah shall be bound together, and it shall bring forth the gathering of Israel, as well as the coming forth of Latter-day Temples and preparing the way for the Savior, right? We've been taught that, but I don't think we value how amazing that prophecy really is. And we're calling it this because the start, when that prophecy was given, a lot of people, sorry, that was a little weird, given, but a lot of people don't know that Ezekiel and Lehi were actually contemporaries. They lived at the same place at the same time. And when he gave that prophecy of the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah, Lehi was probably making his way through the Middle East. And so we actually are starting our journey in the Middle East, because that's where the Book of Mormon starts. And in my opinion, it's actually the place that has the most compelling evidences for the Book of Mormon, because the most archaeological evidence, or the most archaeology, has been conducted in that area, just because of the fact that 3 religions have stakes in the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm. And so we went over there with our infield expert, right? His name is Jim Gee. And essentially he's been involved in archaeology research and actually tours in the Middle East for about the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. And being the Book of Mormon enthusiast he is, he's discovered a lot of these cool historical and archaeological evidences. And so we started up in Jerusalem to kind of set the scene of where the Book of Mormon starts, and then made our way down through Jordan and eventually Saudi Arabia, following, what would have been Lehi's trail through the desert. And so along the way, we stop and explore some of these awesome evidences, to
meet some interesting characters too.
Definitely some
people.
Interesting characters, to just bring it to life and make people think. And ultimately, we're not making this to convince people that the Book of Mormon's true, right? Because you and I both know that that's not how it's done. What we want to do is light an unquenchable fire of curiosity for people to engage with the text, because only then, when they seriously pick it up and take it seriously, take it to God in prayer, are they going to be able to feel the power and, ultimately find out that it is another testament of Jesus Christ. And so that's kind of our whole goal with documenting this journey. And so,
yeah,
it's one thing to be a nerd and to go through all of these writings and these books and these papers and everything else. But I think what you're doing, and it's been done in a limited amount in the past, but what you're doing by actually bringing it to life with video and really showing these things and having people give it just makes such a difference to, like you said, with The Chosen. It makes such a difference when people have a view of these things. And we have plenty of this, right, for the Bible. There's plenty of that kind of video out there, but very little really that goes in and says, we're tying this to the Book of Mormon.
For sure.
We're tying this to the stick of Joseph. And here's, maybe how Lehi would have lived, or this is the trail following this trail down south here, through the Negev here, where Lehi would have had to have gone, right? Where he would have had to have been I'm guessing you got your places on the Gulf of Aqaba there and down south and where the Valley of Lemuel would have had to have been. And that's exciting because I think that is really intriguing to say, hey, I'm going to stream this. I'm going to take a look at this. And these things are going to be real. They're tangible. I can see them.
Yeah, it really is exciting. And the thing too that I think sets us apart is you have a lot of people in the Book of Mormon evidences space that do a lot of really good work. You have people that are what they usually are Book of Mormon aficionados trying to be filmmakers, right? And they're not naturally filmmakers. But my background is in film. The guy that we have directing, Cardenellis, who's of Midnight Mormons, you know him, and that's how we got connected. He has a background in film. Our cinematographer, he's worked with Mr. Beast, the largest YouTuber in the world. One of them. No, he's the largest. I think Mr. Beast is the biggest.
I think he's number one.
Or PewDiePie. I don't know. But the point is, we are filmmakers first and Book of Mormon aficionados. And so that's why this is going to be presented in a form of media that's already being binged. How many freaking docuseries are the average member of the church watching every single year on Netflix about serial killers and about just like people that have tigers and are crazy rednecks, right? We'll consume all of that. So why don't we speak in the same form of media, but about something that is insanely uplifting and maybe one of the most important messages ever to exist, and that is the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus. You know, so
you're doing a series here, so you're going to do several releases of this. When are we looking?
Our plan is for this first season, we want to do everything in the Middle East, right? Everything in basically First Nephi, and so our plan is to do 5 parts in the first season. Starting in Jerusalem, the land of Lehi, moving down, following their journey, and ultimately ending up in the land of Bountiful. And so, which is, in
modern day Oman.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're going to be doing those 5 parts, but our plan is to go forward and explore all these other different geographical theories of the New World, right? Whether it be in South America, Central America, or the Heartland theory in Northern America. And the cool thing about it is, I mean, you asked us before if we're partial to any one of those. And it's funny because the more people we talk to that are so tied to these different theories, we become less and less partial because we see that all of them have a lot of great points and a lot of cool things that corroborate with the Book of Mormon, right? But they all shut each other out. And they don't let in room for, these other evidences, right? And so what we want to do is, because these aren't doctrinal claims and things that have nothing to do really with our salvation, but they are really interesting and bring the text to life, we want to throw it out all out on the table and say, here it is. Decide for yourself, because that does what exactly we want them to do, is engage with the text
and figure out their own theory. We're not presenting our theory of what happened or how it happened or where it happened. We are saying, here are all the theories. Now you figure out your own. And the only way you can do that is by reading the Book of Mormon, right?
Yeah, I think that creating that awareness and a motivation is key. I love what you say about, creating the curiosity about the Book of Mormon and learning more about it. And it's not just within the pages. You can find it outside. You can find it in the Middle East, perhaps in the Americas, and again, bring it to life. Now, what brought you guys to this point? I mean, is this something you guys have always wanted to do, or recent thing you thought of?
It's a good question. So it kind of starts with me working in video production. So I served a mission, got home, started a little video production business. And one of my clients actually was Jim. And then I ended up actually just working for him kind of on a part-time basis. And I actually traveled with him to Africa. He does safaris. He spends like 12 weeks a year in Africa doing safaris. So I went and documented safaris with video. And then we went to the Middle East. And that was the first time we did Jordan. We went to Petra. And then we were in Israel as well. And we did that Holy Land tour. And most of it was focused on the New Testament because that's, that's where the whole New Testament happens. And it was amazing. And that was the first time where I've always been interested in history and things of that nature. But when I was able to hold an artifact that was from 3000 BC, from the time of Abraham, when I was able to hold a pot from the time of Abraham, it just like changed my life. I love artifacts. I love the idea of holding something and just thinking about the hands that has gone through, the life that had like some human being that had a life that was a child of God. I kind of get a little, maybe overly spiritual about it, but I think about like the light and the effort and just like the fact that like these little artifacts kind of hold a little bit of every single person whose hands it had passed through, and so I think that's really where I got super interested. And then, I, just as Jackson and I think a lot of people probably listening, I got a hold of the CES letter. I got a hold of everything and I started reading. I'm like, whoa, they're putting a lot of effort. This seems like a very well sourced document talking about all the things that are wrong with the Book of Mormon. Like, I'm going to read that side so that the kind of the Book of Mormon is false and Joseph Smith just made it all up or copied it from a really boring book called View of the Hebrews, that if anyone reads, you're like, if you got the Book of Mormon from there, that's a huge stretch. But I started reading that side and then I started reading the other side. And what I saw was that there is a lot out there and you just have to know the right places to look. And I also found that usually the right places to look are not always the internet, because I used to think that the internet was a depository for all information of human beings ever. But there are books that I have in my library that you can't find that information. They're from, like, I have a book right over here that's from 1844, and it's a journal from an explorer that traveled through Egypt down into Ethiopia. And it was published in 1844, and it's never been digitized. You don't find any of that information online. The only way you can have it is if you have a physical copy of the book. And so I started getting into that. And one thing about Jim, and we can talk about some of his evidence, we can share some of them, is that he's got all of those before the age of the internet, and they're physical copies of things that corroborate the Book of Mormon in a serious way. And so once that happened, I was like, I need to take my skill for video and I need to take this burning flame for not only archaeology and history, but for the Book of Mormon. And I need to combine it together and share it with, because like, for example, our dad, he's not super interested in reading scholarly articles, but like there's all these cool things that I really feel like if they were presented in the right way, he would eat it up. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and all of my friends as well, not all of them are interested in the same thing. So I'm like, I need to start presenting these things in a way that other people can consume that aren't weirdos like me that can read a ton of scholarly papers.
And I mean, I don't come from a background in video, but the reason that this opportunity just made so much sense in like the last 6 months, me, my dad, and my brother have just dove so deep into like ancient history, like Egypt, like pyramids, everything around that, like the Rishat structure that could be Atlantis, like Bright Insight, if you know that YouTube channel, like just devoured it all. And then I'm like, and then this opportunity came up. I'm like, there's all of that, but in relation to the Book of Mormon that is still yet to be uncovered. And there's several texts in the Book of Mormon that have just been such a call to adventure for me. One of them being when Christ is in the Americas and he talks about how, they were the other sheep that he was talking to the Jews about, right? But then he says he has other sheep that have not even heard his voice yet, and that he has been commanded to go and visit them, and that they will record the things that he has written. And I strongly believe that those records are yet to be found in the time of the Lord, right? And like knowing that those things are here on the earth, like there's just so much to uncover. And if I can be a part of that, let's go. Dude, that is so
That's awesome. A call to adventure.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Hayden, you had mentioned holding that pot that's 3,000 years old, right?
Yeah.
And there is, apart from a spiritual, just like, wow, this is, spanning generations.
Mhm.
It's also back to that point of there's the visual and then there's the actual physical
Mhm.
that ties you back to that time. I mean, there's no way of not being tied to that time when you have the artifact from that time, right? I mean,
chills right now. Yeah.
it adds a realism that you can't really get in any other way.
Mhm.
Right. And so that artifact is there. What was it like going through the Middle East and, going south down through the Negev, going down toward the Gulf of Aqaba, going into Jerusalem? What was it like as you visited some of these spots with someone like Jim Gee and seeing and being tied to through these artifacts back to 600 BC-ish and saying this was the land of the Book of Mormon at that time?
Like, Greg, I'll tell you, most times in my life when I feel that I have felt close to God and felt the Spirit, it was very tied to emotions, right? But the feelings that I got, like we made a stop in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? And they have trees that date back to essentially the time of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And all these other artifacts that we were seeing. And it was just like such a surreal feeling that it's so indescribable. One of the coolest experiences that we had out there, Jim has connections with everyone out there.
Mhm.
Okay. And he's treated
like we walk into restaurants and they just bring him his drink and like they just know him. Like it's awesome.
And they
He's like the Mormon Indiana Jones.
Yeah. They take us back to this private table and like we don't pay for anything. It's like
so cool.
It's on us. But anyways, he knows this guy out there that is super into antiquities and stuff. And one thing that he's done is dug under his antiquity shop, just dug straight under into the ground and has excavated like hundreds of square feet of dirt from underneath his shop, and has uncovered like some of the streets of Jerusalem that date back to
true Crusader time. So like we're talking 1000 AD. And so that's a part of the thing. We went underneath the streets of Jerusalem in these secret caverns, crawling through these holes filled with sandbags. And like, it was incredible. And that's the thing that's really cool about Jerusalem, is that a lot of people don't know this, but Jerusalem has been built and destroyed 17 times throughout the years.
And 2 of those were like complete decimation.
Complete destructions, which one of them happens in the Book of Mormon, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other one happens and that's been corroborated by evidence too. And we saw some of those evidences while we were there. And then the other one is at the time of Christ, right? The Romans destroy it in 70 AD. Yeah. And so, but before that, there's partial destructions and takeovers where like the Muslims come in, they destroy stuff, they build on top of it. And so it's just crazy to stand in Jerusalem and just know you can dig deep, 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 and you're essentially going through time. And so when we climb down into this little cavern and we're underneath the streets at the old streets of Jerusalem, it's just like we stepped back 1,500 years.
Yeah. And we went into this newly dug part that they're digging under a different shop that may or may not be theirs. But I went and I was digging through the dirt, and then I just peel this piece of pottery up that was like wedged underneath the earth. And like holding that piece of pottery, I'm like, if I could have a time machine to just click back when the last time this piece of pottery was in use
or held by another person,
like he was just so wild. I'm like, this is what it feels like to discover something. And obviously it was just a piece of pottery that like doesn't have, much significance. But I was like, this feeling is like so much adrenaline. I just like, it was wild. And so Jerusalem was an awesome experience. And then traveling down through Jordan, and one of the things we get into in the series is a lot of people don't recognize that to travel in the desert and survive, you need camels. Like you need camels. And it's not just like one per person. They live and survive off of camel's milk, right? And so Lehi,
and one tent is 500 pounds. It's a goat hair tent. We stayed in one overnight with Bedouins after we traveled in the desert with the camels that day. And so each tent has to be carried by one camel. So when you're talking Lehi going in the desert, he's going in with a lot of camels, possibly 30 for his whole group.
Yeah, because we know he then later picks up Ishmael and his family, and they each need to all have tents, and so we go down and travel through with camels, and just that like little insight alone like brings it so much into life, because you realize kind of the conditions they were under when they departed from Jerusalem, right? Mm-hmm. And the things that when it says they gathered, their supplies and things that they needed, and just departed on a moment's notice. He would have, had to have been wealthy enough to have that kind of camel power, right? And horsepower, we have horsepower here in America. They have camel power, which may not be stronger.
Yeah.
And it's like the diesel.
Yeah, it is. No, camels are insane. And that was one of the funnest things. Like, first off, camels are like the grossest animals that have ever existed. Like, the noises they make are like absolutely horrendous. It's like tauntauns. Like, when Luke Skywalker cuts the tauntaun open, it's that bad. It's like,
so it's kind of like me when I'm sleeping. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, just like you when you're sleeping. And so but the way that they're built for the desert and like everything, but also the things that you have to know in order to handle a camel caravan. And so that's one of the evidences. I mean, and there's debate on what Lehi's what his profession was. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he was a merchant, a traveling merchant, because it is very complex to handle, a 40 camel caravan and make it through the desert and survive, right? And so it was really cool because we traveled down Wadi Araba, which is the only place that he could have gone. He could have gone through Wadi Araba because it goes like this. It's like you have Jerusalem up here, you eventually get to Wadi Araba. Right now, half of it is a valley. In Jordan. It's a big valley, huge. It's like it's about as wide as the Salt Lake Valley, but it's really, really long.
Big mountains on each side.
Big mountains on each side. And you travel down there, and then it kind of comes to a point in Aqaba, which Aqaba actually means obstacle in Arabic. And that's because there were two obstacles on each side. The only way you could get to Aqaba was either through the Red Sea or making it through those obstacles. And so we went there, traveled, stayed the night, and it was awesome.
Yeah. And another evidence that Lehi could have been a traveling merchant, and that was just a routine thing for him. It says that they traveled to the coast of the Red Sea, right? By the borders of the Red Sea. But it doesn't even say how long it took them, right? And then after that, when they departed from Aqaba, right? The shores of the Red Sea, it says they traveled 3 days. And so, we're led to assume it's like, if we're up here in Salt Lake City, if we say, we traveled down to St. George, we don't say how long it took us or that we got in our car, because it's just a common thing for us to do,
We traveled to St. George.
And so when in reality, Jerusalem to the shore of the Red Sea is a 9 days journey by camel. Camel caravans can travel on average about 25 miles per day. And so it would have taken 9 days to get there, and then 3 days to get to the Valley of Lemuel.
And the reason it wasn't even mentioned, you don't hear anything about the mention of that, is because it was probably very common for him to make that journey. Because anyone who is a traveling merchant, everyone goes to Aqaba, whether you're going the frankincense trail after, which goes through modern day Saudi Arabia, then Yemen to Oman, or you're going to Egypt to trade as well. Aqaba is that place, that area that you would go. And so so we dive into a lot of these things, right? We could talk for hours about it, and we don't want to give away all of our cards, but we talk about all of these things and other theories as well, because there's other theories about what Lehi's profession could have been. But in diving into these and reading these clues, and the thing that's cool too is, like, I was looking at Google Earth for months in preparation for this and coming up with my own theories of like, oh, well, it looks like these mountains are too crazy to pass. It must have not worked out, and they must have had to gone another route. But it wasn't until we were on the ground there where I was like, oh no, they totally could have passed through these mountains. Like, there's these huge valleys that kind of go through them, but you don't see it from Google Earth that well. Mm-hmm. And so it just shows, like, another reason this is important is because until you actually go there and you stand in those places, like, you can't really come up with really clear picture of what could have happened, right?
So share with us at least one or two of the places that you went and what we're going to be seeing in the docuseries in terms of, I mean, you mentioned a few things here, but what were some of the things either in Jerusalem or on the way down and coming down through Jordan, going to the Valley of Lemuel? What were some of the things that you saw that you can share with us?
Okay. Well, I'll share. So the last place that we stopped at, which was pretty cool, we stopped in a place in Saudi Arabia called Wadi Tayyib al-Ism. And it is a candidate for a potential place for the Valley of Lemuel. We do know, so like Jackson was saying earlier, it's about a 25-mile-a-day pace that you're able to go with camels. And so they were going 25 miles a day. It says from Aqaba, which would be the shores near the Red Sea that they travel to, it says they travel for 3 days. So that would mean you have about 75 miles
To work with,
right? It's amazing because these giant canyons start to form right about 65 to about 80 miles away from Aqaba, right? And they're just these massive canyons. And one of those, which is kind of near the end, which is about 75, 76 miles away, is Wadi Tayyib al-Ism. The thing that's really unique about Wadi Tayyib al-Ism is that it has a perennial stream, a little stream that runs all year round. Now, if you type in on Google how many perennial streams exist in Saudi Arabia, you can go to the Saudi Arabian website and it will say the government website, and it will say there are no perennial streams in all of Saudi Arabia. But there happens to be a stream, a river, a little stream of water that runs within the realm of possibility for the Valley of Lemuel, which we know that the Valley of Lemuel had two things: a giant, huge valley that was steadfast and immovable, and also a river of water that continually ran into the Red Sea, or at least he wanted at that time it was running continually.
And these valleys, like Wadi Tayyib al-Ism, steadfast and immovable is possibly the only way to describe this, right? We're talking about, it gets up to 2,000 feet tall, pure granite walls.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That are just incredible. And so this place, nowadays you see they have a bunch of flash floods, right? And so you see where the water kind of flows through the whole canyon, and we walked down it, and it, sure enough, flows into the shores of the Red Sea, just like described in the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. And we say candidate because, there's a couple different valleys along the coast in that frame. But even if it's not, painting the picture, being there, it's like, okay, how did Joseph Smith know that there were even mountains in this part, especially valleys that, came right up to the shores of the Red Sea as described in the Book of Mormon?
And I think that's one of the strongest evidences of the Book of Mormon, especially in those first chapters in First Nephi, is how little was known. Most of the Western explorers hadn't gone to Arabia, what was known as Arabia at that time, until we're talking the early 1900s. There were people that were doing it in the late 1800s, but it wasn't until really Lawrence of Arabia, right, during World War I, went over there, and all of these other explorers like Bertram Thomas and others traveled in that area, and we really got an idea of what existed. And so the fact that the topography matches the description in the Book of Mormon so well is absolutely stunning. So that was one of the really cool places. What's another one? Okay, we'll tease on that one. Okay. Let's talk about it. Tease it.
Did you see that teaser that we
yes,
we cut?
Yeah, it's great.
If you haven't, anyone that's listening, go to Stick of Joseph YouTube channel. It's our main home thing. Watch the teaser right now. Watch it, and then you'll see what we're talking. What we're going to talk about.
We'll put a link in the description on that.
Cool. So in the teaser, it kind of shows a little part where we're talking with one of these antiquities experts that Jim has connections with. And one of the biggest arguments against the Book of Mormon is the talk of the use of steel, especially steel swords like the Sword of Laban at that time period, right? And
at the time of Joseph Smith, steel did not exist at the time of Lehi anywhere in the world. Okay. And that was like the scientific consensus. So he looked really stupid when he said that the sword was made of the most precious steel.
Yeah. And so since then, there's been at least one discovery of a sword called the Sword of Jericho, right?
The Jericho sword.
The Jericho sword, whatever.
Yeah.
Jericho sword. Anyways, it's basically looks like a rusted piece of rebar, but they can tell that it was a ceremonial sword, right? And through chemical analysis, they've been able to discover that it was made of steel.
And it dates back, and it was found in Jericho, and it dates back to 6th century BC. So right of the time of the Book of Mormon. And that was a huge discovery at the time that was found. And that just was like, oh my gosh, not only did steel exist, but it was put into swords at the time of Lehi. But
so in the antiquities, I guess rings over there, a lot of the coolest stuff is held in private collections because these people find it. And
this was mostly years ago before it was super regulated. A lot of cool stuff fell into private collections.
Exactly. So a few good years back, this antiquities dealer came across a discovery of a sword that was made out of Damascus steel, and it had a silver hilt with very intricate carvings of they think it's like it looks kind of like jaguars on each side of the hilt.
You could say, you could kind of say that like the hilt had exceedingly fine workmanship or something like that.
Something vague like that. But this sword, and through carbon dating, have found that it also dates back to 600 BC. And if you remember the description that Nephi gives in First Nephi, when he goes back at night to the house of Laban to go retrieve the plates, he pulls out the sword and he recognizes at night, probably
immediately
under moonlight, right? Or, candles, it was dimly lit, but he recognized immediately that it was made of the most exceedingly fine steel. Now, Damascus steel, the way they make it is, they take the material, fold it, smash it, and add carbon to it to strengthen it. And once they cure it, I don't know if I'm using the right words. I'm not a freaking metallurgist or whatever. Blacksmith, whatever. But it makes these watermarks that you can visibly see on it.
Oh, I actually have one right here. This is a Damascus steel sword, dagger. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But it has like these beautiful watermarks on here. And it's just kind of like this wavy silver and black that you have here, right? And so first off, kind of going back to the narrative, Nephi pulls out the sword and immediately is able to notice. And so that right there is a clue in of itself. What did steel look like at that time? It looked like this. And if it was just like steel today, how would you know it was of the most precious steel? You wouldn't know that. And so that's like a clue in there. This is the only steel that exists. And the fact he was able to recognize it at nighttime was awesome. The second thing that's cool about this sword is that it has a silver hilt. Now, we were talking to this antiquities dealer, and we were like, because he has nothing, he's a Muslim guy, he has no idea about the Book of Mormon. He doesn't even know why we're interested in the sword. And we ask him, we're like, do you know why we're interested in this? He's like, no. I give him a brief explanation of, we have this religious text, and there's this story in there about this guy. He he chops off his head with his steel sword, and it has a golden hilt. And he's like, and I was like, does that seem plausible? It could have happened at 600 BC. And he's like, of course. Why would anyone think that wasn't plausible? That those steel swords would have been very important for people who were guarding something very important or very special. And also the fact that he had a golden hilt shows that he was probably very wealthy and guarding something very, very important. And we're like, okay.
When you watch it, you'll be like, okay, this is staged. But like, this is the first time meeting this homie. Like he, like he said, he's a Muslim guy, doesn't even know what the Book of Mormon is, but just
That's
being
cool.
able to see this and, compare it with the description given in the text, it was wild.
Absolutely crazy. And so we've just barely started our journeys. We made it down to Saudi Arabia, the Valley of Lemuel, but we're hopefully going to go to Yemen. We're going to go to Oman. And Jim Gee, this guy, and we just want to give as much credit to this guy as possible because he's done years of research, but he's actually the one who found the maps of Nahum, which Nahum is one of those I would say it's the closest thing to definitive evidence of the Book of Mormon that exists,
or that we've found
so far, right? And should I give us quick spark notes of Nahum? I won't get super into it.
Do it.
Yes. So in the Book of Mormon, Lehi leaves. They stop at a few places. One of them, it's called the Valley of Lemuel. And it says, we stopped in a place that we called the Valley of Lemuel. They stop at another place that they called Shazer. And then later on, they stop at a place that they called Bountiful, right? But there's one place that they stop, and it's the place where Ishmael dies. And and in the text, it says, we stopped in a place which was called Nahum.
Already
right?
had a name.
So already had a name. It existed. Okay. So at the time that the Book of Mormon was written, it didn't exist, at least to the world. It was not an existing place. It wasn't found on really any maps of the world. However, there were maps. So what happens is Jim, he reads an article that is in the Ensign. The Ensign. And this is when he's on his mission. It's like the 1970 something, 78 Ensign. He's an old guy. I'm just kidding. But so he's reading that, and he reads about this guy named Steve Christensen, who he said that he saw a map somewhere, and it was a bad photocopy. And this was back before the internet or real photocopies. It's just a picture of a map. And he says it looked like there was something that said NHM or something on there. There has to be a map somewhere. And so Jim, as a missionary, is like, I'm going to find that map. And so for the next 20 years, he goes and he's going into private map collections and all these sort of things. And he finally finds a map that has Nahum on it, that is in the exact location that it would need to be in order to fit the description given in the Book of Mormon. And
wow.
The thing that's amazing is none of these maps have ever been found in the United States, let alone New York at the time of Joseph Smith. All of them have been found in Europe, because you have to remember that maps, the way they were created was insane. First, you had to go there and spend years mapping out the land. Then you draw it out, and then you have to etch that map into bronze or brass. You etch it into there backwards, right? It all has to be backwards. It has to be the mirror image. Then you put the ink on it, slap it on there, and then you paint it. And really, it was like an expensive work of art. And only the wealthy of the wealthy could obtain maps because of how much work it was to get them. And really, you didn't have maps of other places of the world. You only had maps of the places of the world that pertain to you. And so all of these maps existed in that area, and none of them had been found in the United States. And it stands as a witness that Joseph Smith, to be able to find or to be able to guess that there was a place called Nahum in this random place in the world that fits the exact description, it's honestly more unbelievable to think that he did that than to think that an angel appeared to him, gave him golden plates, and he translated them by the power of God.
Yeah, it's 1,000,000 to 1.
It's not even 1,000,000 to 1. It's like, think about all the letters in the alphabet, and him to get, he could have picked as many words as he wanted for this made up city, and then for it to fit in the exact spot at the exact time. And since then, they found altars in that area that have the inscription of Nahum on it. So not only is there historical kind of evidence through the maps, but there is physical archaeological evidences of the place called Nahum.
And you can't just give Joseph, if you're going to go down that line of thinking, give Joseph Smith credit for guessing that right, but guessing all these things right in sequential order.
It's crazy.
And even in First Nephi alone, the sequentially, the things given in sequence, right, that all match up so perfectly, like that's just giving him way too much credit in my eyes. And when you couple that with a spiritual witness from God through prayer and study, it's powerful. And that's just kind of what we're trying to give everyone the opportunity to do, to gain a powerful witness through presenting these evidences.
Well, this is very exciting. It's a great project. I'm jealous. I think it's awesome. I think what you're doing is awesome. And so I'm happy to promote this as much as possible. When did you say the first? You're looking at maybe the first release of this would be?
So it's interesting, and maybe there's people in your audience that could help out with this. I I quit my job on a whim at the same time that we were having our second child to do this. It's ludicrous. If it wasn't, the spiritual promptings that I've had really driving this, it makes zero sense. And somehow, by the grace of God, we raised money to do this pilot. And so we filmed this pilot. We're going to cut it together, and then we're going to use it to hopefully fundraise for the rest of the series, because that's what we need to do. Once we get the funds for that, we'll go and shoot it. And then hopefully what we're aiming for is the beginning of 2024 to start releasing these episodes for the world to see. And but that said, we're going to be sharing little clips and things like that on our YouTube channel to get to just kind of get people excited about it. And we'll see.
Remind everyone where they can find you.
You can find us on Instagram at The Stick of Joseph. Then our YouTube channel titled The Stick of Joseph. And soon we'll be having a website up as well, thestickofjoseph.com. Yeah. So
awesome. All right. Hayden and Jackson Paul, thanks so much. I am very excited about this, very excited about what you're doing. Creating more awareness and more curiosity, more motivation for the Book of Mormon, and tying us back to that time, I think is crucial. So really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate it.